Welcome to the Village Group Chat. I'm Alyssa Williams here with Dusty Brown and Anthony Holt. We're here to talk about the things that you see in your chat, whether that's politics, culture, and everything in between. Today, we're getting together to talk about Juneteenth. What are we doing? What does it mean? We're going to just start out with just a little bit of conversation. So, Desi, what do you have planned for this Juneteenth?
Well, typically, every Juneteenth for the last maybe 2 or 3 years, I've hosted an event over at Paul Quinn. But this year, unfortunately, I don't know if they're not having the event or not having the budget, and so it was kind of disappointing. And I'm sure that some of these things in place had kind of contributed to that. But it was definitely a disappointment because it was a way for me to bond with my aunts over the last few years, and so life moves so fast, and one of my aunts reached out to me a few days ago, like, "Hey, you hosting the event this year? We coming, right?" And I'm like, "Man, unfortunately, it's not happening." But me being based in Texas, Juneteenth is always been, even though it's a federal holiday now, it's always been important to people here in Texas. And you have the mother of Juneteenth, Opal Lee, out here, so she's doing a few events. So probably try and pop by one of those and support that this year.
Well, can you touch on that a little bit? What is Juneteenth? Being a Texas native, right? What does Juneteenth mean to you? You shared with me that you've had a little bit of complex feelings about it.
Yeah,
What's up?
yeah. My mom, she loves Juneteenth. Like, I talked to her this morning. She's like, "Happy Juneteenth!" But every year, she would always take us to some kind of parade or festival, no matter how big, how small. But I always had mixed feelings about it because, for people that really know what it means, it basically was that in Texas we found out that the slaves were free later than everyone else. And
Right.
so it's one of those things where, yeah, it's great to commemorate the fact that all slaves were free, but it was also kind of disappointing to find out that the reason that we were celebrating that day was that, in Texas, they wanted to get that extra, I guess, crop in, or whatever the case may be. Like, they wouldn't go tell the slaves that they were free. Like, it literally had to come from somebody else because they were trying to get more work, from the slaves those couple years or whatever. So that's the reason that I say, I have mixed feelings about it. And then also the city that I'm from. I'm from Greenville, Texas, and if
Okay.
anybody knows about Greenville, Texas, or the sign or things like that, there was a sign in Greenville that said the blackest land and the whitest people, that was up for a lot of years. And Greenville is known for its cotton. And so that was another
Mm.
reason. And like in Greenville, there's an annual festival called the Cotton Jubilee. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, do we really need to be celebrating that? Do we not? Like, I get both sides. And so that's why I've always had mixed feelings about the holiday of Juneteenth.
Sure. And so, just so folks who don't know, you alluded to it. So, Juneteenth is the celebration of the last 250,000 slaves being free in Galveston, Texas. So, what happened was the Union soldiers came to Galveston. They gave word that the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed 2 years earlier in 1863, and the final slaves were actually notified in 1865. So those were the final slaves who were, notified, like, you have your freedom, and it had to be executed or delivered by Union soldiers because the folks in Galveston were not allowing the slaves there to be free, despite President Lincoln's signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Um, Anthony, you're on the West Coast.
Right.
I want to know, how do you feel about Juneteenth? What do you have planned for the day? Break it down for us.
I mean, with Desi, I probably don't go as deep because, like he said, he lived it. He grew up in that. So I
Mhm.
mean, I didn't grow up really knowing about Juneteenth like that until really my adult life. And with that, I mean, we all have mixed feelings because of what it was and what it means, but I take it as a time to kind of educate my kids. Last night we got to watch an episode of Blackish. I think season four, episode one, but it really broke it down in ways that they could understand, and then they got to ask questions, and my son gets on and does his research, so we take it as a time for that. And then today we're gonna go out and we're gonna hop to a couple different events so they can see more of our culture, be more around, our people with a day that we try to make festive since it is a national holiday now. But I take it as an opportunity to learn our history because especially now when a lot of our history is continue to try to be erased. I think it's important that take these moments and teach them, and also us re-educate because I learn more every time I do more research. So talking with Desi, it educates me more about what he experienced there. So I take it as a more of a educational piece, and then we go out and we try to celebrate with our people as far as being amongst each other.
I have to be able to I have to agree with you. Should say is I have to agree with you that I grew up not knowing a lot about Juneteenth, just from where I grew up on the West Coast, and there was always a Juneteenth celebration in Seattle where I grew up, but the explanation wasn't as deep, right? And the feeling wasn't as rooted. It was for me, it was always more of a community event, and I didn't think much more of it than that. And as I've gotten older and learned more about the meaning of Juneteenth, I think that's where I'm like you, Anthony, of wanting to take the time to educate myself and my family. Today, we're taking a trip to a Black-owned bookstore because I was like, let's immerse ourselves in the stories and our culture. Right, our culture isn't all about. I actually had this argument with my son a little bit. He was like, I don't want to read about struggle. I said, the Black story isn't all about
Right.
struggle. These are about centering Black people and our stories and characters and in narrative, and being able to really immerse ourselves in the Black experience. And so I feel like that's what Juneteenth offers us, just a moment to pause, to think more about why we're here, where we've come from. Um, Desi, I do want to ask you a little bit more about, how is Juneteenth received broadly in Texas? You kind of touched a little bit on it when you said, it's a big community celebration, but what is it like for, is it just the Black community? Or what I find, like in Seattle, it is everybody in the community comes out for Juneteenth, regardless of race, creed, color. What is it like in Texas? Is it primarily just a Black celebration, or is it deeper?
It's always been deeper. Of course, it's been rooted in Black history, and so
Hmm.
of course we're at the forefront of it. But there, it was a time for education. Even if you were not Black, or even if you are Black, it's definitely a time of education and reflection and things like that. And typically, it's like commemorate, you know what I mean? Like it's different words surrounding it as opposed
Sure.
to celebrating. Almost like
Mm,
if you think about, like, we're in Texas, so if you think about like remember the Alamo, like the Alamo actually, wasn't a good battle, but they're saying,
no.
remember it, not
Remember it.
celebrate the Alamo. So I
Right.
kind of look at Juneteenth like the same way, like remember it,
Hmm.
reflect on it.
Hmm.
I don't like to say celebrate technically, me personally, but
Hmm.
I understand it, and yeah, it's a great time to be with family, to spend that time together. They have so many events, leading up to, on the day of. Now that it's a federal holiday, a lot of more people have the day off, and so you see a lot more events happening on the actual day. Whereas in the past, if it fell on a Wednesday, if it fell on a Thursday, whatever the day may be, you may see some of the larger celebrations like the week before, or maybe even the week after sometimes. But now there are a lot more things happening on the actual day since it's a federal holiday now.
Absolutely. And I actually want to touch on the federal holiday because once it became a federal holiday, what I also noticed is, so in Seattle schools, they get out a lot later than most schools around the country where they're already out for summer. a couple years ago, we were in school still during Juneteenth. And the most proud moment I've ever had of, my child going to school was him coming home and saying, "Mom, I learned all about Juneteenth today. They taught it to us in school." That is something that never happened for me while I was growing up in school. And so by it becoming a federal holiday, it really enshrined it in the education system. And so, Anthony, you had mentioned, hey, we're at this moment where people are trying to, well, not people, we're seeing erasure of our culture at the almost at the federal level, and we know that it's important for our kids to be, to really understand where our culture comes from. What other ways, you mentioned you watched the Blackish episode of Juneteenth, which is awesome. Are there any other unique things you like to do, or with your kids, or any moments of things that they've shared with you just along the way about Juneteenth?
I mean, really, it's just the point. My kids are real inquisitive. They love to learn. My son really loves history, so we try to just dive in. We pull up stuff on YouTube. We do our research. We look into things, and then we like to get out. We get out in the community. We go out to certain parts of the community where they can see some of these things, see our people, and then talk to other people. Like today is one of the days where we're going to talk to other people. They have booths. We can learn from them. Learn
Yeah.
some history that they may be sharing right there. So I try to put us out. I try to give us experiences as well. So not just like look and research it, but we try to get out and experience it. I think that's important to be able to learn from our people too. To be there to see, to talk, because everybody has a different story, and everybody can share different parts of history and from their perspective. And I think it's important to do that because, like we said, we may be the only ones kind of teaching our history for a
Mhm.
period of time right now. So it's
Yeah.
important that we be able to share that with our kids. And again, I learn something all the time. Every time we go, not only are they learning something, I'm learning something because I can't say I'm just a pillar of all things history. I learn something every time
Mhm.
we go out and every time we do some research.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining the group chat. Today was all about Juneteenth, and join us each week as we talk about all the topics from politics, culture, and everything in between.